Chapter 8. Food for the Masses. Karnak and Marks sat in his office going over the information they had requested from Supply. Both knew that supplies were limited, yet had no idea that so many would be showing up to join the cause. So many that, even if they severely cut rations, they could plainly see that it was a matter of days before the supplies they had would be almost gone. Tyler, the jailer Sawyer had sent out for recruitment, had been doing too good of a job. Even though Karnak and Marks both understood they couldn't handle any new personnel, they also knew they needed them as much as the recruits needed to be a part of the movement. Well, I guess running down to the supermarket is out. I heard they had a going-out-of-business sale, Karnak joked, trying to lighten the gloomy reality of the situation. Any food stores and warehouses had been cleared out by looters days after the power outage. This wasn't due to people starving, but to the thought of not being able to find food once they had exhausted what little they had in their homes. We may have to stop taking people in. There just simply is not enough to go around. Marks echoed what they both were thinking, though neither liked the idea. Not just yet. There has to be some farm that hasn't been ransacked, or warehouses or tractor trailers still out there, Karnak said with hope in his voice. Marks, who had been out with his men gathering equipment and supplies, knew better. Everything has been looted. My men and I have seen many trailers empty on the highways as well as empty warehouses that were once stocked. Marks hated giving that kind of information, but it had to be said. Let's bring in somebody from the area who could know something about it that we don't, Karnak suggested. Not sure that is a good idea. People start hearing rumor of the shortage and it could get bad here real quick. We'll have to take the chance, and I have an idea of who might know something. Runner. Karnak called out to get the attention of the private standing outside the office for the sole purpose of running messages. As the private entered, Marks asked, "Who?" Buck. He was the dispatcher at the police station. He should have heard plenty from the calls he took. I agree. He was helpful in locating much of the equipment we have now. Marks was a little bothered that he hadn't thought of the man. Had it not been for his help, they wouldn't have located much of what they currently had. Minutes passed as Karnak and Marks discussed what could be done if Buck couldn't provide any new ideas. With a knock on the door, they were about to find out. "Enter!" Karnak was eager to hear new ideas. Buck entered the room not quite looking as he once did when he last wore a uniform. Years of sitting behind a radio as local dispatch had taken its toll on his physical appearance. Still in decent shape, he stood before them with a noticeable belly pushing out the front of his uniform, one that couldn't be tucked in. "Buck, glad to see you." "Thanks, Colonel. What can I do for you?" Buck asked with a bit of a smile on his face. Unlike many to Buck, the end of the world had become something of a positive. He was enjoying being a part of something larger than himself and not sitting behind a radio for 8 to 12 hours a day. "Karnak, it's your show," Marks said, turning his attention to him, as if giving Karnak one last opportunity before revealing the shortage to Buck. Without hesitation, Karnak addressed him. "Shut the door. We need to talk." Hearing Karnak's tone caused the slight smile to leave Buck's face. He turned to do as Karnak had asked. A half-hour passed with no new ideas. The only thing they had done was eliminate places that may still provide supplies. Buck was feeling down for not being able to provide any real input into the situation, one that he now understood was very important and became much more so with every bite those outside the office took. "Well, Buck, thanks for the help. We can trust you will keep this to yourself?" Karnak asked as he stood, signaling that they no longer needed his presence. As Buck stood, he saluted the two of them before turning to exit. As he did so, he frantically searched his mind for any idea that would help. Reaching for the door, one thought occurred to him as he turned the doorknob. Releasing the knob, he turned back to Karnak and Marks. "I may have something, but I do not want to sound like a conspiracy nut." Karnak and Marks both laughed hard, not at Buck, but at the idea that anyone could be considered a conspiracy nut these days. "Sorry, Buck. Go on," Karnak replied, as he brought his laughter under control. With the current state of affairs, Buck quickly realized the two were only laughing at his word choice, and not at him. I was just thinking about a conspiracy I saw on YouTube of underground tunnels. Karnak and Marks were focused on every word. The conspiracy said that FEMA was storing metric tons of food and other supplies in them, and that they are connected to other areas all over the United States. Buck waited to see if the two were going to dismiss the idea before continuing. You remember where they were located? Marks was obviously interested in what he was hearing, and not ready to turn down any conspiracy idea that may be out there. After all, he thought, we are living a conspiracy now. There is one here in Jefferson City. Karnak's and Marks's faces appeared to brighten with ideas and hope. Do you know where? Marks asked with anticipation. I might. We did receive calls from one place that had problems with people trespassing, and I know it was a government facility. The small smile appeared again on Buck's face as he filled with excitement. What do you think? Marks looked over to Karnak, who, despite being a much lower rank than him in the U.S. military, now commanded a militia of his. Only seconds passed as Karnak thought about the possibilities. You watch over things here, and I'll take Buck and a few others to check it out. That old Willie running that you brought back? Marks envied Karnak for the ability to make decisions the way he could never do in his command. Prior to the collapse, Marks could have never made a command decision without first filing a mountain of paperwork. As the head of the UCM, Karnak was able to do so without such restraint. Yes, my guys have it running like the day it came off the assembly line. Then again, that was back in the 1960s. Without further discussion, Karnak called out once more, "Runner!" As the private made his way into the room, Karnak began gathering his gear and checking his weapon. Private, have Sergeant Smith and Robert report to my office. Dismissed. Sergeant Smith is right outside. Do you want me to have him come in, Sergeant? Excellent. Yes. No sooner had the private exited than Smith walked through the door. Sergeant, thanks for seeing me. I wanted to talk with you about training the new recruits, if you have a minute. As he spoke, Smith could tell that wasn't going to be the conversation they were going to have as he watched Karnak rack the charging handle of his weapon. Smith, we are going out on reconnaissance. It will be you, Robert, Buck, and one other of your choice. Have your gear ready to roll in 10 mics. Roger? Roger. Command Sergeant. With his nerves more jittery than before going into battle, Smith waited to see Karnak's reaction to being addressed as Command Sergeant. What was that, Sergeant? Karnak growled, causing even Marks to tighten up in his seat. Smith was ready for this, and quick to respond. With no disrespect, the men and I just feel that we should not be calling you Sergeant. You are so much more than that position. Marks agreed with Smith and could tell Karnak was having a little difficulty with the title. Karnak, he's right, he said with confidence and reassurance in his voice. I know he's right, but it doesn't mean I have to accept it without protest. Karnak stood staring at Smith with a face of stone. Plus, I want to see how long he can hold his breath. Karnak had noticed that Smith had seemingly stopped breathing. With that, Smith relaxed and visibly took in a deep breath. Seeing Smith's reaction, Karnak continued. 10 mics, Sergeant, thus ending the discussion. Roger, Commander. Smith quickly spun and exited before seeing Karnak's reaction to being called only Commander. Shaking his head side to side, Karnak was a little distraught at being called Commander, and Marks easily picked up on it. Buck, you heard the Commander. 10 mics at the Willie. Marks didn't have to finish before Buck was out the door, happy to leave the room at that point. Once the door was closed, Karnak looked right at Marks with an expressionless face. What was that? Commander? Captain Sawyer was the commander, not me. Listen, Karnak. Commanders change for one reason or another. As much as you would like to remain a staff sergeant, you are not, and the men know that. You are the commander, so deal with it. Marks had carefully selected each word. Fine. Let's move on. I need you to have Lee ready to move with 100 men. If the tunnels are there, I don't want to waste any time. Do we have the ability to transport that many? Easily. My guys were able to get the buses running again by bypassing some of the electronics. Since we are on the subject, I wanted to talk to you about getting more help in the shops. Marks beamed with pride over his soldiers' work as he spoke. I was thinking the same. Ask around and see who you can use. That shop of yours is more important than ever. Karnik was grateful to have the knowledge and strong work ethics of Marks's men. He knew that without them, things would be very different.